All right, here we are, ninth grade lit. This is the last thing you should have written down. And so we'll move over to this. One of the hallmarks of the tales are that they're all different, and they're different kinds of tales. You go into Barnes and Noble, when you used to go to libraries, how they separate the books in different sections. And Barnes and Noble, you can get romantic fiction, you can get literature, you get historical. So this is like a library, or a bookstore. You go into this one book, and you get all these kinds of stories. A romance would be the kind of thing that is adventure. Really, that's what it relates. So there's one of those at least. A fableau is a short comic coarse tale. It's not very long. Beast epic, we're going to read one of those, where animals speak. A classical legend, a saint's life. Believe it or not, that was interesting to people. They wanted to read about saints. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine going to the grocery store and having a newspaper, a magazine, National Enquirer or something? Instead of movie stars and royalty behaving badly, they have stories about saints. They have stories about missionaries. I mean, it's almost comical, isn't it? Nobody wants to read about good news, and yet that's interesting. That's exactly what Philippians 4 tells us to do, is to what everything is true, what everything is noble, whatever thing is just and pure and lovely. But my point is, that sounds really old-fashioned, that people would, but there's an example of that in the book. Again, it's just, in the last thing I'll show you is several quotes about the prologue, which is, really an introduction to the whole book. And it just shows you why it's so well liked and respected. So there's one more slide on the types of stories. I know when I ask you on the test, I will ask you for this. A lot of people say, I don't remember that. Well, here it is. These are the kinds of stories you'll see. And again, an exemplum is a story useful to preachers. In other words, an example, some story that would maybe be an example of a moral virtue. There's a sermon, I don't remember which one it is. I don't remember reading it. There's a tragedy, we talked about that, with Murder Cathedral. And a popular story was a miracle story that involved the Virgin Mary. And then a couple of statements I'd like you to write down. Well, one is here. Dryden I think he was a contemporary of Shakespeare, and he said, "'Tis sufficient to say, according to the proverb, that here is God's plenty." So it just says a statement about the richness of the variety of stories there. Almost all of them, because it's part of the contest that they create. They put this in terms of a contest, and they're going to vote on, or actually the host is going to determine who's the best, who tells the best stories. And one of the rules is that the story has to have a proverb or moral. And that's not what you would expect in modern stories. So that's one thing, when we read 3 stories and each one of them has a moral, has a lesson to be learned. And so you're going to have to know what that lesson is.
Our quiz on Peace Child is tomorrow, right?
Yes, it'll go in the next quarter.
Is it going to be like the size of one of those workout quizzes or what?
No, I mean, let's ask about 10 questions.
Oh, okay.
So, what happened here? In terms of remembering names, I think you should remember some of the main ones, like yay, and I'll really identify, that so-and-so is of the other tribe, and that would be useful just as a writing tool, is to remember who's a part of what tribe. There are only two tribes really that matter right now. The Murrow, or they're not tribes, they're villages, the Murrow and the Hainem. I think they're all in the same tribe. All right, so I think we're about ready to move on. I think there may be one more to complete this. So here are a couple of statements, three actually, about the prologue. I think this is the last slide. I like them and I could use them on a test, that as a writing prompt. The first one says that the prologue is the concise portrait of an entire nation, high and low, old and young, male and female, lay and clerical, learned and ignorant, rogue and righteous. So several things that statement tells us about what to expect from reading the prologue, and that is, if you want to know what medieval England looks like, then the prologue would tell you that. And what it does is it shows you all kinds of people, high or low. And frankly, almost all countries have these kinds of contrasts, but the important people, the noble people, whatever they are, the significant people, and the average person, old and young, male and female, lay and clerical. Well, we don't have that much anymore. Lay and clerical refer to the church, which was the biggest and most important institution of the era. Learned and ignorant, well, we still have that. Rogue and righteous. So you get a little bit of each of these people when you read the prologue. Another statement, it says, the pilgrims are presented with stunning clarity, touched with nuance, very normal without extreme. So these are not extreme examples. These are not caricatures, if you know what that word means, where you take a type of person and you simply exaggerate them. That's what, you don't have that here. You have normal people, but they're all different. And they kind of represent people like it. We'll see people like this. Maybe they're not in the same occupation, but we'll see people like this in every generation. And that's what the last one kind of refers to. They are the perennial progeny of men and women. Progeny means offspring. And so I said if you wanted to see what medieval England looked like, read the prologue. That's really too narrow. You want to see what real life is like, read the prologue, because there are going to be people like these people in every era. People haven't changed that much. There's some basic characteristics that never change. We might be a little taller, might be a little bigger, but our hearts are the same, our minds are the same. So I like that. When you read the prologue, you're reading about really human nature, and that's one thing it's worth reading for. And let me just check. I'm pretty sure this is loud. I'll turn it right back. Yeah. So this will be the last one. You have a book. I have your number. You have questions. So once you finish writing this, why don't you get those sets of questions out, and we'll start reading. We have just about 10 minutes. That's enough time to get started, to get our feet wet. Yes, sir.
I can't find my questions.
What's that?
I can't find my questions.
All right, I'll get it.
All right.
everybody have what you need? I'm gonna go turn this off, and, yeah, go ahead. All right, I am going to, start the reading. You know, we do a lot of that together. I'm gonna get you to help me. But I'll start it today. I'll read today. I'll get you guys to help. So if you will find the beginning of the Canterbury Tales, the prologue. Notice in parentheses or brackets it says Group A, and I told you that editors, after his death, before it was published, they had to organize the material. So they put them in 10 groups, and in those groups, they grouped them that way because they appear to be related to one another. And you'll see how that works when we read at the end of the prologue. I'm going to read, again, you are too, we're going to read the translated version. This is the modern English version. But you're memorizing the other version, the Middle English version. So are you ready? And remember, you cannot write in it. I hate that. I couldn't read this without writing it, therefore I have written it. But you do have the questions, so keep those nearby, and you can make comments and you can write in the margin.
Are we reading prologue?
We're doing the prologue. All right, you ready? Let me start. When in April the sweet showers fall and pierce the drought of March to the roof, and all the veins are bathed in liquor of such power as brings about the engendering of the flower. Also, or when also Zephyrus, the wind, with his sweet breath exhales an air in every grove and heath upon the tender shoots, and the young sun, his half course in the sound of the ram has run, and the small fowls are making melody that sleep away the night with open eye, so nature pricks them and their heart engages. Then people long to go on pilgrimages. The palmers long to seek the stranger strands of far-off saints, hallowed in sundry lands, and specially from every shire's end of England down to Canterbury they wend, to seek the holy blissful martyr, quick to give his help to them when they were sick. So I like the Middle English version better because it's prettier. It's more fun to say. All right, so it happened in that season that one day in Southwark at the Tabard, I lay ready to go on pilgrimage and start for Canterbury, most devout at heart. At night there came into that hostelry 29 in a company of sundry folks, happening then to fall in fellowship. And they were pilgrims all that towards Canterbury meant to ride. The rooms and stables and inn were wide. They made us easy, all was of the best. And briefly, when the sun had gone to rest, I'd spoken to them all upon the trip, and was soon one with them in fellowship, pledged to rise early and take the way to Canterbury, as you heard me say. So let's answer the question. So who do you think the I is? Chaucer himself. Now that's not always the case. You can't assume the poet or the writer is the I. Huck Finn or Mark Twain is not Huck Finn, even though Huck Finn is the narrator of the story. Mark Twain is a grown man living in the 1880s, and Huck Finn was a 14-year-old boy living in the 1850s. But in this case, you're right. It happens to be that the narrator is Chaucer. Secondly, when and where did the pilgrimage begin? When and where? Yeah.
Well, is it when it says it happened in that season, that one day in Southwark?
Yeah, what season? Spring. When that April with your shower, so it's the season of spring, or get more specifically, it's in April.
When?
April. Where did the pilgrimage begin?
At the Tabard.
The Tabard Inn in London. Southwark is a section of London. How many pilgrims were going on the pilgrimage? He gives us the precise number. 29 plus
9, 30.
1. And that 1 would be Charles. So there are 30 pilgrims, Chaucer being one of them. Now let me go ahead and answer number 4. It's actually not told us till the end of the prologue. I don't know why I put it here, but I think it might confuse you to leave it blank. We might forget. So the contest that the host proposes is what, well, I've already told you this in the notes, that every pilgrim would tell 4 stories, 2 going to Canterbury and 2 coming back. It's 55 miles one way, and it would take them 4 days one way. So all this was to be done really just a little over a week.
Every pilgrim would say 2 stories?
4 stories,
4.
2 stories each way. And the prize would be a meal.
A meal?
A meal. You know, they buy them a dinner. Okay, Freddie, why don't you said you want to read a little bit? Why don't you do that? Just read a stanza, or you know, this is poetry. So although it kind of looks in a way, it kind of looks like prose, got paragraphs and indentions, but you don't use the word paragraph. We'll use the word stanza. So,
I'm starting at.
but nonetheless. Oh, by the way, Chaucer is going to introduce each of the pilgrims to us. And how did he get to know them? Because it says at the top, by evening, he said, I'd spoken to them all upon the trip, and was soon one within in fellowship. So he's a real outgoing guy. You know, here 30 people don't know each other. Some of them may know each other, but they all come together, and Chaucer goes to each person and introduces himself and finds out about them. Of course, he's a writer, so that's what writers do. But I just think that's interesting. So, Freddie, why don't you we'll just read this one stanza and we'll be done.
But nonetheless, while I have time and space, before my story takes a further pace, it seems a reasonable thing to say what their condition was before. Of each of them, as it appeared to me, according to profession and degree, in what apparel they were riding in, and at a night I therefore will begin. There was a knight, a most distinguished man, who from the day on which he first began to ride abroad had followed chivalry, truth, honor, and endurance and courtesy. He had done nobly in his sovereign's war, and had ridden into battle, no man more, as well in Christian as in heathen places, and ever honored for his noble griefs.
So several things here before we go. He's going to tell us 3 things about each pilgrim, all right? And just write this down. Their profession, their occupation. We'll get to know everyone's occupation. Their degree, and degree means their status in society. And third, what they're wearing. You know what the first thing men, when they meet each other, you know the first thing men say to grown men say to each other? They don't know each other. What do you do for a living? What do you do? And so, isn't that interesting? That's the first thing he's going to tell us, what they do, their job. So we will pick it up here tomorrow. The first one we'll hear about is the knight. He's also the first one to tell a story. So he'll be the narrator of the first story.
Rewriting.
You're writing.
I think so.